what is the roadmap of the new Modi government vis-a-vis economic, and policy space. Joining us now is Subhash Garg, former Economic Affairs Secretary and Finance Secretary of India. We also have Shantanu Rooj, founder and CEO of Team Lease. Sunil Shanghai is founder and CEO of Nova One Capital Private Limited and also chairman of National Committee on Capital Markets of FICCI. Subhash Garg, beginning with you, your thoughts. It is being said that one of the most pressing challenges for the government is to boost demand, as that would be a crucial factor for stepping what has been a concern, perhaps going up in what has been a concerning private investment cycle.
So I think the country is at a stage where it needs a very fundamental restructuring of economic policy and the program, something of the order and the type we did in 1991. I think the government has promised to look at long term in its vision of Viksit Bharat. And it was promised in the last budget that the roadmap for that vision for next 25 years or so would be laid out in the incoming budget, the regular budget, which is to be presented next month. So I am actually looking for that roadmap, that document, to sort of see what is the way the government intends to tackle with the challenges which the government, which India is facing, including the challenge which you just mentioned about the demand contraction in the country. Over last 5 years, there has been a very tepid growth of consumption, less than 4.5%, so to say, which is a very low growth for a country like India. There is an enormous rural distress caused by loss or less growth in the incomes in the form of wages and all. That is a very serious issue. How do you raise the incomes of the people so that the demand function comes up in the economy? I think we will need to wait for what the government says in the
incoming so you'll be waiting for the full budget, which will be coming in the month of July. So, Ms. Sitharaman certainly has a task cut out, I would say, for doing that very important balancing act, which is needed at the moment. But Sunil, come in on this. When here is the world's 5th largest economy, which is, the forecast is that the growth will be around 7.2% during the financial year ending March 2025. The urban centers are growing faster than the rural centers. Do you think this lopsided development will be a big challenge going ahead, as was being pointed out by Mr. Garg when he said rural distress is an issue which has to be addressed?
Which you raised. And let me just add first that rather than calling it as a challenge, I would put it as an opportunity for the finance minister, because if you really see, this is like a second inning at the back of the very good first inning, right? And the pitch also looks very good because you have a very balanced fiscal, you have a reasonable growth, and you also have moderate inflation. So with that kind of background, I think this is a perfect environment to play some good shots. Now, if that is the background, then some of these areas, which is unemployment particularly, which takes care of the rural and urban both, unemployment which is largely concentrated on manufacturing. You just heard Dr. Panagaria talked about the manufacturing sector growth and services. I think those are the two sectors. If the manufacturing is focused and the services sector is focused on, I think that unemployment part can be taken care of. If we cut the data, construction was another sector a few years ago where there was a lot of stress, but that has been taken care of. The employment is reasonably good there. the employment has to grow in manufacturing and services sector. So those are the sectors which one has to
Okay.
really focus on.
Yes, Shantanu, come in on this. Of course, we are looking at various reforms, but how critical are the labor laws, particularly keeping in mind, and the much needed boost that the manufacturing sector needs?
So Maria, as rightly said by everybody else here, is saying that the recovery from COVID actually has been K-shaped, right? So the people who are highly skilled, people who are at the upper end of the society, they continue to grow. The stress came from the people who are at the lower end of the skill spectrum. I think that's where the stress is. And rightly said, the boost of the manufacturing setup, which leads to a lot of low-skilled, labor-intensive industries to grow, I think that is going to be very critical in case we have to solve this unemployability problem. The implementation, notification of the labor laws is definitely going to go a long way in terms of ensuring labor security, labor safety, minimum wages implementation. All of these things are going to be a game changer for the economy for sure. I'm sure along with all of these, we're looking at staring at possibilities of making sure that the MSMEs becomes easier for them to do business, ease of doing business, the compliance burden on them, creation of both digital and physical infrastructure, all of these things put together, I think great opportunity areas for the new government to continue with their with the reforms that they have been continuing. I think that's a great opportunity for the country too.
Yes, so the big message is continuity, certainly. Subhash Garg, I have just enough time for you. Nirmala Sitharaman is not prone to making dramatic changes, and that is what perhaps is giving investors and multiple sectors a lot of comfort that the broad policy direction will continue.
See, to be honest, Nirmala ji acts more as an implementer of what the Prime Minister Narendra Modi desires. I don't see many initiatives came from her own. So that would continue in times to come as well. And therefore, what Mr. Modi decides to be the economic priorities, whether you would invest more on infrastructure, whether you would be able to go into the real productivity of the investments. For example, I have studied and I find the investment in railways to be utterly unproductive. They are not yielding any output growth. They are not yielding any GVA growth. So, whereas the road sector investment is much, much better. So, how do you channelize, how do you fashion the policies in times to come? Do you go for more of the subsidies? Last government, whether it was making food completely free or making fertilizer subsidies 90% plus subsidized. And also, I think those are very basic decisions which the Prime Minister will take and Nirmala ji will implement.
So, Sunil, your last thought, particularly with the kind of global ratings and agencies which they have been saying that, they have raised India's sovereign rating outlook to positive from stable. And they have been talking about India's the improved finances and also robust economic expansion. So in terms of the fundamentals, we are certainly have very strong fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm so glad that you asked this question, because as a capital market player, I think this will be one of the top priorities, should be the top priorities of the government. Just look at the data. We are at triple B minus, right? One notch improvement in our rating to triple B. We compared with the countries like Italy and all. The difference in the pricing of the similar maturity bond is almost like 2%, which means our cost of funding will be down by 2%. The global funding will be down by 2%, which is quite a significant. In terms of over a percentage, if you see, it will be almost like 30-40% lower. So if we are paying 6% or so, or 5.5%, it'll be down by 30-40%. So that's a significant saving, which will give boost the lower cost of funding to our projects, and that will give a easier financing and also availability of the fund. So this will be this should be a top priority of the government.
And Shantanu, what is it? Which are the areas which you think have got the right set of ministers based on their experiences? Of course, I mean, we are moving away from finance ministry now. MSMEs and other portfolios, how are you viewing it? And you know, the clubbing of the entire rural space, the rural development, agriculture, all these now being helmed by you know, a 4-time chief minister of Madhya Pradesh, someone who has dealt with this farmers' crisis in the past. In Mandsaur.
This time, I think India is facing two different type of opportunities. One side is to ensure that there is a lot of vocational skill development, a lot of low-skilled unemployability, which is there needs to be taken care of. Other side, to ensure that we also build the digital skills for digital jobs for a digital India. I think both these things are great opportunity. The continuity of the ministers talk a lot in terms of the prime minister's ability and intention to continue with the policy, where policy reforms or the policy continuity in those areas. So I do not see too many challenges coming up there. Dharmendra Pradhan continuing as the education minister is a great boost for the education sector to ensure that the policy continuity remains and the NEP implementation starts getting fast forwarded.
And then petroleum minister, in most of these, 15 ministers are continuing in their respective portfolios, Mr. Garg, and so there is this continuity also in the CCS. So I think at multiple levels, the message certainly is that there are newer faces, but when it comes to the policy, it's a government which is going to be taking forward what the Prime Minister said was a roadmap of sorts, and on which there has been a lot of brainstorming which has been done much before the new government was formed.
Yeah, this is, I think, a very important factor with very senior, seasoned chief ministers becoming minister. And I think this is a very particular challenge for the finance minister as well, because finance minister has to sort of decide and take many difficult decisions, not agreeing to the kind of allocations required, or even talking on terms where, so I think this is an added challenge to Nirmala Sitharaman in the times to come. I hope she will be able to develop the kind of skills which Arun Jaitley had of making and taking people together, senior ministers, without offending them too much. I think it's interesting as well as challenging times ahead.
Yes, all right. Thank you so much for joining us, Subhash Garg, Shantanu Rooj and Sunil. With that, it's a wrap from me.